I don't know if concern is necessarily the right word, but I do think that they should be following the developments in Hong Kong. Even though Hong Kong is only 7 million in total population, and I know in a European context that sounds like a high population, but in China there are many cities that have that population or higher. But Hong Kong, it has a good window into some of the challenges that's China's facing, and it's very visible globally. So China's reaction to what is happening in Hong Kong can have not just an impact in the regional financial markets. It can have a spillover effect into the global financial markets, and we've already seen that where the United States has tried to tie the progression of events and the ultimate resolution to a potential impact on trade war negotiations, and that obviously has a fairly direct impact, or has had a direct impact on financial markets in the past year and a half. So even though Hong Kong is small in some contexts, it is very visible, and it's a good indication of how China is going to interact not only with the situation in Hong Kong, but how much they care about how the rest of the world perceives how they're reacting. I think it cares very much about how it's perceived to react in the Hong Kong situation, not just internationally, but domestically. So there's a careful balancing act. On the one hand, China does not want to be perceived as backing down among its domestic population, because the perception within China is that Hong Kong has already a significant amount of additional freedoms that mainland Chinese counterparts do not have. On the other hand, China's been very careful to cultivate an image of a responsible global citizen, and one that wants to continue to grow and interact with the rest of the world and develop positive trade relations. So how it reacts to the situation in Hong Kong, I think China is very aware that there is a sensitivity to that in the rest of the global community. And finally, probably most importantly, China's relations with Taiwan are a very important element of its long-term platform. China has made it clear that it seeks to reunify with Taiwan at some point in time. And I think it's fairly well established that the one country, two systems setup that exists in Hong Kong is a potential model for Taiwan. So a successful resolution to the situation in Hong Kong now is very critical to be able to put that forward at some point in time. Absolutely. China is undergoing fairly significant changes. And the reason we should care is China is already the world's second largest economy. And it's on a growth trajectory to be the largest economy in the world, probably sometime in the next 10 or 15 years. Within that context, there are implications for what's going on in its capital markets, in particular the bond market. So the bond market has been progressively opening up over the past couple of years. The first step was inclusion in the IMF's SDR basket. So the significance there is, even though it's only a relatively small amount, 280 billion, China gets a pro rata share of that. And if sovereign wealth funds and central banks follow that allocation, that means a significant technical inflow of money into the onshore government bond market. In addition, China government bonds are going to be progressively included in major global bond indices. So we've already seen that with the Bloomberg Barclays Global Ag Index earlier this year. JP Morgan just announced that China is going to be included in the GBI EM index starting in February 2022. 2020. And the largest is going to be the FTSE World Government Bond Index, used to be the City World Government Bond Index. So in anticipation of the index inclusion, we've already seen a huge foreign inflow into the government bond market. And this helps with a broader campaign to internationalize the currency. So China wants to have a competitive reserve currency to the US dollar. So all of these steps are being taken to ensure that process can go forward. So we're probably in the early stages, but we've already seen a tremendous uptick in foreign investment into the onshore market. The government is making it easier for foreigners to invest. Large pension funds and insurance companies, for example, for the past few years can invest directly through the CIBM market. China has started a Bond Connect program in Hong Kong and is looking to extend that into other cities. And legacy programs like the renminbi Qualified Foreign Investor program have recently had quotas taken off. So all of these steps are taking place to increase foreign ownership or foreign activity into the onshore bond market. My answer to that would be, and I understand why there might be some concerns outside of the Asian region when it comes to China. China has a different form of governance than we see in many Western markets. But I would say in terms of the trustworthiness of the Chinese government, in terms of its interaction with foreign investors, there's a fairly long and strong track record in that regard. So I see no reason why that wouldn't continue to be the case. If the internationalization of the RMB is such a high priority, the Chinese government is going to be very careful in how it interacts with the foreign investment community. They want to continue to earn that trust. Traditionally, you would think of Asian fixed income as being a subset of global emerging markets, but what's developed in that market is a sort of a homegrown demand for dedicated Asian fixed income solutions. There are two facets of the market that I think support having a dedicated Asian fixed income only strategy and make that sustainable. And that is when you look at the growth trajectory of two facets of the bond market. One is the local currency bond market, the other is the hard currency bond market. Okay, the local currency bond market has traditionally been government bonds, but in recent years we've seen an uptick in local corporate bond issuance, particularly in the Chinese market. So the Chinese onshore bond market is the third largest in the world. It's the second largest credit market in the world. So at 14 trillion in size, that's the approximate size of the onshore bond market. It's very large in and of its own right. The hard currency market is 1 trillion in size. The sort of proxy investment universe for hard currency bonds in Asia is the JP Morgan Asian Credit Index. That recently passed the milestone of 1 trillion in size. And so when we compare that to, for example, Merrill Lynch's Global High Yield Index, which is about 2 trillion in size, you can already see that the Asian hard currency credit universe is of a fairly critical mass in size. So, we're already investing in that. From a country perspective, there are 17 countries, there are 13 sectors, and when you combine them country by sector, you have, potentially over 30 subsectors to invest in. So we find this to be a fairly dynamic and sustainable, dedicated fixed income strategy. I think that is something that could possibly be considered, and for a couple of reasons. When you think of the performance drivers in a fixed income portfolio, whether it's duration positioning, whether it's curve positioning, or whether it's your credit risk allocation, Asia has all of those elements, whether it's in a local currency portfolio, whether it's in a hard currency portfolio or a hard currency portfolio with a local currency overlay. You could accomplish all of those factors within an Asian context alone. And then in addition to that, you have the added benefits of what we like to call in the hard currency credit market, a spread premium. Okay, so this has been observable and consistent over time. The Asian credit market tends to be more highly rated than its global and regional counterparts. It has a lower default frequency, and in addition, it has higher spreads. So when you combine those three elements, higher ratings, lower defaults, and higher credit spreads, that puts you in a very good place in terms of total return and risk-adjusted returns over time. So you have all of the factors in place in terms of the performance drivers, and then you have the performance track record. So our feeling is, or our recommendation is, that is something that can be seriously considered.